This video is sponsored by my day job. All views and opinions are my own. Likes and subs are appreciated, but don't hit the notification button. Does anybody actually even do that? Seems annoying. Don't do that. The Callisto Protocol doesn't seem like a divisive game if you only look at the critic ratings. If you look up reviews on YouTube, you get a bunch of back and forth feelings on this game. What did I think of it after a playthrough? Well, I don't hate it. Let's get into it. Welcome back to JBG. Today we're going over the Callisto Protocol on PS5. A couple quick disclaimers here to start. Somehow, I've never played through the original Dead Space. I bought the remake, but I decided to wait until I got done going over Callisto Protocol before playing through it. There's a lot of conflicting opinions on this game, and I totally get why. I'm even a little bit conflicted on it after I played it. I was putting off this video until the DLC came out, because I honestly was looking forward to seeing where they went with it. I saw reviews for the DLC, and then I finally just watched spoilers for it. I'm glad I didn't spend the money on it, since it didn't really fix any issues that I had with the initial game. Mild spoilers ahead. I won't be spoiling major plot points, but there will be some later game footage, and a specific scenario that I'm going to talk about that could be considered spoilerish. The Callisto Protocol is a horror action game from Striking Distance Studios, and famously directed by one of the creators of the original Dead Space, Glenn Schofield. The game starts out pretty strong. And honestly, the story itself is what kept me playing, even when some gripes came up. It opens up showing a terrorist attack on the Europa colony, being credited to the terrorist organization The Outer Way. You play as Jacob Lee, a cargo ship pilot making deliveries to the Jupiter moon Callisto, to Black Iron Prison, a former mining colony that's now, well, a prison. Your ship is boarded by The Outer Way, and when trying to jettison them out the airlock, one of the main members, Danny, shoots a hole in the next airlock, leads to the ship crashing on Callisto. Captain Ferris, my boy Sam Witwer, pulls you out of the ship with the only other survivor being Danny, the chick who caused the crash that just killed your co-pilot. The warden orders you and her taken to the prison as prisoners, and after a short in-dock cutscene, that sets the tone for the prison. You wake up with your cell open, and all kinds of crazy creatures running amok. You're basically trying to find out what is even going on, and obviously, a way to get off Callisto. Let me just say real quick, it's nice to see Sam Witwer in another game. We miss you, Deke.
This is my kingdom. It's all yours.
Well, I guess see you next time, Deke. The mechanics start out pretty strong here, too. You leave your cell and start out on the basic tutorial section. You're introduced to Elias, who gives you a prison shank, and directs you to where to open the remaining cells to let him out. You get your hands on the first melee weapon, and are introduced to the mechanics for the combat. Your basic melee comes down to dodging and counterattacking for the most part. Instead of a typical dodge button here, you dodge by either pressing left or right on the analog stick when an attack is incoming. The window and complexity of it differs with difficulty level. I'm pretty sure on the easiest difficulty, you can simply hold the stick to the left and avoid all attacks, as long as you aren't in an attack animation already. There are a few issues here, but we'll go over those in a bit. Eventually you get a hold of the hand cannon, your starter pistol, and a stun baton. This is where the combat starts to diversify with mixed results. You have some pretty simple combos that add in quick shot for heavy damage. It'll be most effective through the early game as bullets are scarce to start out with. There's an option for a heavy attack also, but considering the wind-up time, I never noticed enough of a damage difference to make it worth it. You pick up that gravity glove that was showcased so much in the trailers. It's called a grip. This adds a little more depth to the combat options, but not as much as I was expecting. Of course, you'll also get a few more guns through the game, but basically these amount to 2 pistol variants, 2 shotgun variants, and an auto rifle that comes in much later in the game. All your weapons and grip can be upgraded at upgrade stations throughout the game, and at those stations you can also purchase health refills or ammo instead. Now before the main issues I had with the game, let's gloss over the DLC real quick, and why I didn't decide to play it for myself. One issue most people had with this game was the ending. Not spoiling it, it was left on a cliffhanger ending that a lot of people just didn't like. There's also mechanical issues that show up as you play through the game, and there really wasn't much attempt to address these in the DLC, just a story add-on. And this story wasn't exactly what everyone wanted to redeem itself after the cliffhanger ending. There was really only one new enemy added, one new melee weapon, and it wouldn't even transfer over to the main game for New Game Plus. I'll just say after sitting on this video while I waited for the DLC, I saw the ending for myself, and I'm glad I didn't buy it. I actually prefer the original ending to what they did with the DLC. Going back to the main game though, let's go over some of my praises before going over some of my gripes. Without a doubt, this is one of the best looking games ever.
16 times the detail.
You'll seriously stop at times and pan the camera around just to take in what they accomplished here graphically. The voice acting is AAA, even with a bit of the overdramatic moments later. Even with those, though, it's completely expected in this genre to get a few overdramatic lines. This setting is almost perfect, too. A prison colony on a moon, it's a little Alien 3, but it was still a great setting as far as I'm concerned. And on console, this was optimized perfectly. There wasn't any frame drops, no clipping issues, and really no tendency towards glitches, even right at launch. The initial melee combat is also a nice change from the norm, too. This game really starts off so fucking strong. It's a shame where it starts to break down as you play through it. Let me just reiterate here. I don't hate this game. It's just complicated. There are some gripes that a lot of people have with this game. I think they're completely justified, though it's going to depend on the person. I thought the initial melee mechanics were a cool switch up from the typical single button dodge mechanic. The melee combat doesn't really change at all from the beginning of the game, though. Even with adding in different guns to the game as you get further, you don't change up the combat enough to keep it interesting. I mentioned you only get 2 pistols, 2 shotguns, and late game you get an auto rifle. Having any of these in your inventory means that your ammo drops will differ for each weapon you are carrying. This wouldn't be an issue if you could drop a weapon and refocus ammo drops. That's not an option here. So you end up dropping ammo for a weapon you don't use and lacking ammo for what suits your playstyle. Or you're constantly switching up your gun mid-combat to compensate for the ammo that you're picking up. Even with the adjustment to reload speed that was done post-launch, it's still too sluggish if you're surrounded by gank fights. And there's a specific gank fight on an elevator platform that was so frustrating to get through. The combat isn't designed for multiple enemies at once. This got so frustrating for me, I actually dropped the difficulty just to get past it because it wasn't the fair kind of difficulty that I could even appreciate. The great horror atmosphere starts to break down also by the overuse of the exact same jump scare mechanics. Whether it be the little slug-like enemies jumping on you for a quick-time event, or the snake-like enemies that lunge out from pods leading to another quick-time event. Neither of these are used sparingly enough for them to continue to be effective. You're going to see these a lot. To the point that it becomes infuriating with the padding mechanics. This is my biggest issue with Callisto Protocol. It doesn't respect your time. It pads its length through shimmying through tight spaces over and over, and an overused forced slow walk mechanic, and forcing you to fight in some late game areas where you'd rather just avoid the conflicts. There's a common misconception that the only reason the shimmy mechanic is used is to mask loading times. This was common game design last generation, yes. It's also used in level design to break areas up to naturally guide the player through levels. Here, it doesn't seem like either of them were the mechanics that it was being used for, especially considering how closely some of these sections are placed. It seems like this was only used to pad out playtime. It sounds kind of weird, as if it's going to really pad out that much. But actually, between the forced slow walk sections, the slow transition movements, the overuse of the jump scare quicktime events, I would say it easily puts another hour onto a game without it being gameplay or story exposition. And the forced combat is probably my last major gripe. In theory, this is supposed to be survival horror, meaning your inventory management is a main mechanic, including your ammo. I found late game that certain gank fights you couldn't just run through. Your transition button to shimmy or climb a ladder to get out of the area just wouldn't appear, and more often than not when I would try, it would end up getting me killed and I'd have to replay the entire section anyway. So eventually I just committed to overstocking ammo, and the game just became more of a horror shooter than a survival horror game. This might be patched out, as I did play it weeks ago and was waiting for the DLC, but I haven't seen anyone reviewing the DLC that says they changed any of the main game mechanics. And this is where I might sound kind of contradictory. I bought this at full price at launch. For what ended up taking me about 10 hours to get through, and a minimum of an hour of that was infuriating padding of slow movement transitions and overused forced slow walk sections. But that doesn't mean I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to anyone. I really did overall enjoy my playthrough, just not for the price I paid for it. Right now, it's consistently priced around $30, and you can find it even cheaper secondhand. I'd say if you're a fan of this kind of sci-fi horror, I do think the $30 price point is pretty well worth it here. They hit the atmosphere really well, especially at the beginning, and no one could argue that this game doesn't look absolutely amazing. There are a lot of redeeming qualities here, if you can look past the blatant design flaws. If you aren't much for the horror genre though, I would say wait for this to be a free grab on a subscription service, or just save your money altogether. you won't really be getting anything out of a playthrough. That's just my thoughts, though. Until next time.
Name's Elias, by the way.
Jacob.
Don't lose it, Jacob. Might just save your life. Don't leave me hanging.
What? Toodaloo, motherfucker. Hey, you